Welcome to my tutorial for Double Dragon Revive on hard mode, and this is my solo playthrough. So this is going to be a solo tutorial. I haven't actually tried this game in multiplayer. It took me around 11 hours and 7 minutes to beat hard mode, and prior to this I went through normal mode, which I recommend doing first. That took me around 4.5 hours. But I would say go through normal mode first just to get a feel for the layout of the game. And, it'll give you a good general feel of the boss fights and shit like that. Because hard mode really is only hard because of maybe two parts. At least for me. I struggled on two parts. I had, the first part I struggled on was near the end of the game. It took me about 3.5 hours to beat the 4 bosses at once, which I'll definitely, talk more about that when I get to that part in the game in this video. But that part took me about 3.5 hours, and the final boss took me over 4.5 hours to beat. So those two sections, made up, I don't know, maybe about 8 hours of the 11 hours. So, most of my time was spent on that. I kind of cruised through a lot of hard mode with a pretty small amount of deaths on the actual stages themselves. There was a few bosses where I died a few times, but like nothing too crazy. I think Willy, the semi-final boss, may have taken me over 20 minutes, if I remember right. But none of the bosses really took me too long on hard mode. But I did have a general idea from normal. So the way the game works is you have infinite continues. There's not a live system. It's just when you die, when your health bar is depleted, you will go out to the continue screen, and when you continue, you're going to go back to the last checkpoint you got to. So there's checkpoints in the stages. There's usually a few in each stage. It's not really that well indicated until you die, then you'll see where you end up, but it's not super well indicated. So what I did for this in the editing of this hard mode playthrough is I just edited in the word defeated or something like that, like where I actually died. I show that part. I don't show how I actually died because it's kind of redundant. Because I'm trying to show the successful sections, all my successful sections, just to demonstrate the strats that I used for the playthrough. So I didn't spend time showing, the whole run, where I get far into the checkpoint, then I die, and then I got to go back and redo it. I don't want to show all that. I do show that. I edited it like that for the actual a playthrough that I posted up with no commentary. So check that out, but it's only going to show, the first failed attempt at each checkpoint, and then it'll show the successful run of the checkpoint. But for this, I trimmed it down a little bit more, so you're actually going to see where the checkpoints are in the stages. If I actually died, then you'll see where I had to restart at. So just look for that in the editing. That'll give you an idea of where a good deal of the checkpoints are. There were a number of checkpoints where I didn't die and I just got through them, so you won't really see where those are at. But there was definitely a number of sections where I had to redo at least once. So that's pretty much how it works. The game also saves, so if you turn it off, you can go back. I believe you can go back to whatever checkpoint you unlocked in the stages. There's a chapter select too, so you can always select whatever chapters you want to replay. I didn't actually try that though. I'm working on the challenge mode now, which I haven't seen any videos for that. So once I complete challenge mode, it has some pretty tough challenges. I'll post up a separate tutorial for that, and that's going to be a solo run as well. So I've seen some co-op for the actual hard mode, but I haven't seen any solo playthroughs of hard on YouTube. So this may be the first tutorial for it. And as far as the challenges, I haven't seen a single challenge posted up on YouTube, so I'll have the entire challenge mode shown once I complete that. So this is the first boss. I actually got a good ranking on this stage. Not that I was going for rank, but I didn't die. So I guess I got an S ranking for just playing through aggressively. And this is an enemy you're going to deal with a lot, these Abobos. So, this boss character, you're going to see this character a lot. He's not actually the main boss of the stage. I think now, or shortly after a few more scenes, it'll be the actual boss of the stage. But he's not too bad to deal with. You just kind of, fight the enemies normally, and the best time to hit the Abobos is when they turn blue, when they're picking up rocks. But I don't know if that one, I don't know if he actually has that move yet. So you can use your cyclone kick to see if he's vulnerable, because it'll knock him back sometimes. And if you see him flinch, you can maybe get in some hits as well that way. But the Abobos are tricky because they're so tanky. So if you can get weapons, it's better to hit them with weapons. It's usually a little safer and does more damage. I do recommend paying attention to all the different moves because we're going to use most of the moves. Like this wall jump attack they teach you early on. It's actually something you can spam and pull a lot of bullshit with. If you're having trouble in a section that has walls, you may be able to spam wall jump attacks heavily to get through the section if you need to do that. It is an option in a lot of areas, but there's a lot of places where you can't do that because there's no walls available. So just keep that in mind. There's a lot of environmental shit in this game. You can kick these bags. You can any purple objects in the background, you can knock enemies into it for an insta kill. So a good technique in general for the game is if there's any big enemies that give you trouble and you want to kill them instantly, save the background hazards for the tougher enemies, and then wipe them out that way because you can kill them really fast using the background shit. For these charging guys, there's a little bit of a delay to it, but when you see them lay that red line on the ground, they're about to charge. You want to wait a few seconds and then use your tornado move. That's the easiest way to counter them, is using your spin kick tornado type of move when they're rushing at you. But you got to get the timing down on it. But basically, the way the game works is whenever an enemy turns blue, whenever they flash blue, if you can hit them with any move, you're going to get massive damage, and you'll usually stun the enemy, and you'll build up your dragon meter, which lets you use your screen clearing moves, which are very important. So it's very good to counter enemies, when you can hit them when they're flashing blue. Once you get the timing down on a certain enemy type, it's always going to be the same for those enemy types. So, learning that is going to help you through whenever certain enemy types appear. You'll be able to utilize that. So it's worth paying attention to when they flash blue. Now, of course, you can decide when to use your dragon special by pressing X and A at the same time as it's flashing on these enemies' heads. The reason I'm not using it here is because what I recommend doing is saving both filled dragon meter gauges for this boss right here. And by doing that, you'll fucking destroy him because you'll be able to use 2 screen clearing dragon moves on this guy, and it's really going to damage him heavily. So I'd recommend, just save it. Build up your meter by fighting guys and then just save it for this guy. It just makes it a lot easier. That would be my strategy for taking out this guy really easily. See, I used 2 of those moves on him. Now he's pretty weak. So now there's 2 things I can do. I can combo him against the wall, which is a super important move in the game. If you just mash the punch button next to a wall and you got the guy sandwiched in a wall, you can do a massive damage move, which is super important. So if you can take advantage of that, do that. I wasn't really doing that this early in the game, but I learned to abuse it later. But you get plenty of baseball bats here, and if you hold down the button for the swinging the baseball bat, you can charge it up and do a super hit, which does massive damage, and it sends the guy flying. So get those baseball bats and just beat the shit out of them, and it makes it very easy. So, just use 2 of your dragon charges and just finish them off with the baseball bat. Just ignore the enemies. Once you defeat the boss, that's it. The stage is done. So if you can take out enemies if you want, but I would just use the spin kick hurricane type of move, because in this game you can spam those hurricane spinning kicks and it doesn't waste your life or anything like it does in a lot of other beat 'em ups. So you can spam the shit out of it, but it does have a little bit of a recovery after it finishes. There's a little bit of an animation where you kind of stand still for a moment, and that's when you can get hit. So obviously that's put in place so you can't just mash it and spam it continuously. So just be aware of that. I mean, don't go crazy with it if you're surrounded, but use it strategically to knock out the guys that are directly in your way, and just be aware that guys are not going to take their turns in trying to hit you. So expect an enemy to possibly fly out from the side of the screen and try to hit you after your move finishes. So we'll see some more advanced strats a little later. I was forced to get better at the game later on in hard mode. because it gets really... There's two parts that were really fucking difficult, at least for me. So, I mean, it forced me to learn the game more. I wasn't even blocking. You have a block, you have a dodge button. The dodge button is a great way to move around quickly. Use your tornado kicks to counter these motorcycle guys. When you get the timing right, it's pretty easy to do. You can take them off pretty easily. And, then dodge out of the way when the motorcycle's on the ground because it explodes. But you see, you can pretty much counter them all with that tornado. That one I got sloppy on, but, you get the idea. There's a lot of areas, too, where you can knock enemies back into the background and off of ledges and shit like that. And I think there's an opening in this stage, too, where you can do that, but you'll see a lot of that later. There's actually a part where I knocked a shitload of guys over the railings. It made it a lot easier. One of your attacks is an attack that knocks enemies into the background. And it's super useful for crowd control, knocking enemies into each other, and also knocking them into hazards. So you're going to be using that a lot later on. Now you have some acrobatic swinging moves you can do, where you swing up into the air and then you can come down with a ground punch. And that's actually quite a good move that you can spam the shit out of, just like the wall jump attack. But the control on it is absolute shit. I mean, you'll jump towards the thing and hit the right trigger, but a lot of times your character won't swing. So it totally fucks you up. So you got to be careful with that. It especially sucks in the challenge mode where you pretty much have to use it for some of the challenges. And it's so inconsistent. But it is an option. You will get used to it. You'll adjust to a lot of the clunky aspects of the game if you're pretty familiar with beat 'em ups. You play this a little bit, and you'll start to get used to your depth and your positioning better. It's a little awkward at first. The game definitely has issues where your character will target people that you don't want to target. The auto-targeting is not great. But, I mean, I did learn to mostly work around it, but sometimes I will strike in the air or some shit when I'm trying to attack a specific enemy, which is fucking irritating. So I'm going to review this game as well. I actually ended up really liking the game, despite some of the issues I have with it, but I still thought it was one of the best Double Dragon games. The art style kind of sucks, but as far as the gameplay goes, I think the gameplay is fucking great once you get used to it. Though it's definitely janky too, so it's a mix. But yeah, some basic crowd control, knocking enemies back into each other, and obviously in these games, if you're familiar with these kind of beat 'em up games, which if you're playing this on hard, you probably are pretty familiar with beat 'em ups. So you really just want to be grouping enemies together and then, trying to hit them all at once. And one of the good ways to do that is with that spin kick, cyclone type of move. Which, 3 of the characters have that spinning cyclone move. There's 4 characters that you can play as. The ninja is good if you need to move really fast, but otherwise, I don't really like using them. I like using this specific character the most for most of the game. So here I just skipped to the defeat screen, so you didn't see where I died, but this is the checkpoint right here. So we'll see me starting at this checkpoint. Instead of showing me get all the way to the end and then die, it's just kind of a waste of time for a tutorial. So we get a lot of baseball bats over here. The reason sometimes that I would die on some of these sections is because I didn't, get all my life back. So you'll come into this section, you may get a little health back, but sometimes it's not enough. So for this guy that disappears after you beat his ass, he leaves some armor on the ground. If you press the right trigger next to it, you got to be positioned right exactly how the game wants you to be. You press right trigger, you'll destroy it and get a ton of dragon meter, and you'll prevent him from reappearing. So that's kind of how you deal with those guys easily. There's a thing with this game that I don't really use too much, and it's a ground attack. It says RT, you hit the right trigger to do a ground attack. You won't see me do that very much, because it's one of the jankiest things to do in the game, as far as the controls go. So I try not to do it. There are times, like kind of emergency situations, where I kind of need that extra damage, and I'll go for it, but it's fucked me over so many times that I try not to really even use that move. there is a way to guarantee that you get it somewhat. Basically, you got to be a little bit patient when you're walking over somebody's body, and you got to just like wait until you see that right trigger prompt, and then just kind of stop moving altogether, and then hit it. You got to do it like really intentionally, I find, to get it to work more consistently. But I hate using it because I like playing fast and aggressive, and I just don't like having to do this anal, micro positioning when there's enemies everywhere. Because usually you don't have that much time to fuck around and hit enemies on the ground, because of the anal positioning. Now, if it was, if the control was good for that, it would be a useful move to utilize in the midst of combat. You could fit it in nicely, but it's just like a little bit too finicky for me to rely on it. So I usually go with something safer. I will finish off the armored guys that disappear. I think I forgot what the fuck they're called, but the masked guys that disappear and reappear. I will finish them off, with the armor when their armor is on the ground. I will usually go for that because there's usually not other enemies around and shit, and I got kind of used to standing over the armor and doing it with the positioning, but it's still awkward. I mean, sometimes I'll miss that too, and then the guy reappears, because you don't have a lot of time to do it. So these guys are just irritating, just throwing shit at you. Probably better to take the guys out on the bottom first before trying to get up there and deal with that asshole. You got some weapons. The sticks are a very good weapon. You can just smack the shit out of enemies. But this guy will just spam the shit out of the dynamite. And of course, the ladder climbing and stuff is pretty shitty. Because you'll get the prompt, but when you hit right trigger, your guy will do something else or he'll miss the ladder, and then you get fucked. So it's not great. Not my favorite thing to do in this game. You can see that I still wasn't great at grabbing the weapons off the ground. You see, I was grabbing the air a few times, and that was just something I had to get used to. I think I pretty much got pretty good at that shit by now. But at this point in the game, my skills had not really been tested that much. So I was still a little bit, it took me a while to get smoother with the gameplay, It's just a bit of an awkward game to get used to initially. But you'll see me grabbing weapons like crazy a little bit later on. When we're dealing with the 4 bosses at once is when I really, started getting a little fucking wild with my precision. So now this is the successful attempt on this boss. This boss really isn't that hard, but you got to be kind of careful when you hit him. He does do a lot of things to counter. What I like to do is jump straight up in the air and come down with a jump kick, and that often, if it connects, will show me if he's vulnerable, and then I can follow up with combos. Ideally, I like to combo him against the wall because the wall combo does massive damage, which you'll see me doing later, especially on the final boss. So if you can get him, if you can sandwich him between the wall and then just mash your punch button, you're going to get massive damage. Though, another good thing to do is to use charge punches in the middle of your combos. So, while you're mashing punch, load up a charge punch, and it'll knock the guys really far back. And that can allow you to get the guys up against the wall easier. The uppercut is an anti-air move if you hold block and then hit square. Or, in my case, it's X, I believe, on the Xbox. But if you do that, you'll do an uppercut, and that will launch enemies in the air, and you can then jump kick them from the air and do combos that way. But there's not really a lot of aerial combos in this game, but I think the uppercut might be useful for maybe taking out certain attacks. I didn't find much of a use for it. But this guy's really not too bad, I mean, you can tank some of the damage. I didn't even really know his patterns that well, and I was, getting hit a lot. But the priority should be try to combo him against the wall if you can, because that's going to do massive damage. If you do happen to build your dragon meter up, you can also use that for massive damage. The way to build that up would be, see how I countered that move? And by doing that, you get the meter up really fast. But I never really learned this guy to counter his moves intentionally. I would just do it on accident by spinning while he was about to attack me. And eventually you'll probably, counter one of his moves by accident. Which is good, because, then you can maybe use your screen clearing dragon move and do massive damage. But he's really not too hard. He didn't take me too long to beat, so I don't have any great strats for him. I kind of just bullshitted my way through. So these are the shield guys the first time they appear. These are probably the most annoying enemies in the game because they block everything. And You can break their shield with some powerful attacks and things like that, but it's kind of a pain in the ass. The best thing to do is usually to try to get behind them and hit them. Or when they turn blue, if you can hit them when they turn blue, you'll break their... you'll get like a massive counterattack move, which does tons of damage, like I said, and you'll build your dragon meter. So if you can wait for them to turn blue, then you want to hit them by coming up vertically. Don't approach them, don't approach them from the front where their shield is when their shield is up, you know what I mean? Which is pretty much always. You want to either approach those guys either from the back, or, remember this is a 3D beat 'em up, so you can actually come up vertically and hit guys, which is kind of easy to not realize that at first. But that is something that you can do, and it's easy to kind of think, in terms of fighting left and right like you do in a lot of beat 'em ups. I was kind of thinking like that for a little bit, but you can kind of go around their shield and just kind of come up vertically and hit them. You can also utilize the attack where it knocks the enemies into the background. It works good on the shield guys because it knocks them down, and then you could either, if you want, do a ground attack on them for big damage, which I don't do too often, as I said. So here you have a bunch of items you can use to make these guys really easy. You can kick all these exploding canisters, which will do a lot of damage. And you can also use your background attack to knock these guys into the trash bins, which is a good place for these shitty enemies. So if you get a chance, try to do that. These guys are hard to throw. There is a throw in the game. It is hard to do it on these guys because of their shields, though. So throwing can be a useful way to get guys into a position you want, like against the wall, where you can then wall combo them, for like regular enemies. But I don't really like trying to throw the shield guys. It's just not I wasn't too successful with that most of the time. So here we have hammers and shit on the ground, which are really powerful. So, or actually, maybe it's a knife. Yeah, the footage is a little grainy, but the first upload was really fucking pixelated. So this is actually an improvement. Something with the processing I did, I had to re-edit everything because it came out like shit. So it's definitely an improvement from that. But you still got the compression artifacts. So here, just jump these pits and go up the ladder. It's better than doing this. Don't do that. I mean, you can go up the stairs if you want, but you can see it's kind of a fuck fest with all those. I think they might spam shit more. I think they spam grenades even more on hard, if I'm guessing, because I don't remember them being that aggressive, but I could be wrong. I didn't really notice. I couldn't tell you why hard mode is harder than normal. Just that it was, because I didn't actually compare and see if the guys have more health, or I don't really know. I didn't really analyze it. I just played it, and there were just parts that took me way fucking longer. But it was really like, maybe 2 parts that I really had trouble on. But if you beat normal, I think you're going to cruise through most of the game pretty easily, the regular beat 'em up stages, because you get checkpoints pretty well, pretty liberally. So it's not really like, nothing is really brutal except for like 2 parts that could really be like deal breakers. They could end your, people. I'm sure people would quit the game because of that, those 2 parts. But you'll have an idea of what I did, and it probably will help. Because I didn't see any information on this when I beat it. I just figured it all out myself. I couldn't find any videos of anybody playing through hard mode solo or any information. And that includes the challenges too. So I'm coming up with my own strats for the challenges as well, since there was no videos of it. I think this game kind of got shitty reviews, so I don't think it's too popular. I mean, I think it's fucking great, but I'm in the minority. So yeah, I died on that part. That part was a checkpoint. You can knock that Burmov guy, the disappearing guy, into the background item for an insta-kill if you want to take him out easily. You can also knock enemies into the logs. I usually knock the Burmov into all those logs, and it causes a big fucking mess. As you can see if you go back a little bit in the video. So again, when this guy turns blue, take your chance to hit him because it does massive damage and builds your dragon meter. That's the best time to attack him. You could really just wait. I didn't really know how to fight a Bobos that well at this point in the game, but you really could probably just wait for him to turn blue when he's about to throw a rock at you. Just try to lure him to throw a rock at you and then just hit him. And if you just did that, you'd probably be fine with this guy. But I was trying to fight him head on, and it usually doesn't go too well. But luckily, this Abobo will leave after a while. After he takes enough damage, he just leaves. So you don't have to take out all his health. So you don't really have to hurt him that much before he just leaves. I think there's an achievement for killing the Abobo, like not letting him escape. But, you know, if that is the case, it's completely optional. I didn't even know that you could prevent him from escaping, but I saw it in the little achievement list. Remember that you can spam wall jump attacks with some success as well. There is crates that you can wall jump off of, and you can just keep doing that attack. And if you're persistent enough, you probably could just bullshit your way through that fight by wall jump attacking only. However, I wouldn't really recommend it that much just because you're going to have to deal with these guys in much harder situations later. Especially when you're fighting 4 bosses at once, and if you don't know how to fight the Abobo properly at that point, you're going to have a lot of trouble because you got to fight all 4 bosses at once with minions and a fucking helicopter. So it's really fucking hard. So I would try to get used to him somewhat, just fighting him somewhat normally. Though when I did beat those 4 bosses on hard mode, I kind of saved the Abobo for last because I didn't really have them down that well at that point either. But there was at least some weapons and things I could use to my advantage. So here was a death that I had in this area just to show that this is another checkpoint. So this is the next checkpoint. This part is just irritating because it kind of controls like shit. The platforming is one of the worst parts of the game. But you're basically just going to want to run and, you know, swing across, obviously. And sometimes you may want to wait for some of the flames. And, you know, you can try to jump the dynamite to some degree. But, I mean, it gets really close. I got through it with no damage, I believe, on my successful attempt here. It might have been my second attempt. But still very annoying because it just plays kind of shitty. The jumping is not great for platforming. But the good thing is you get a checkpoint, so you should be able to bullshit your way through there eventually. So now I'm just showing that I died on the boss. And of course, anytime you get to a boss in this game, it's a checkpoint. A main boss, I should say, not the mini bosses. Like the Abobo that we just fought that runs away, that's not a checkpoint. You got to go back to the area with the logs and the disappearing guy. But so for this guy, this was a hard boss for me on normal, but I beat it pretty quick on hard because I already kind of had an idea what to do. So you want to try to combo this guy against the wall whenever you can, and if he does his rushing attacks, sometimes he'll be blue. Afterwards, for a while, you want to try to catch up to him real fast and hit him when he's blue for massive damage, and good charge on your dragon meter. So, you're kind of just waiting for him to finish all of his charges, so you may want to jump. But the main thing you got to look out for here is that you got to watch out for those flames that come out, obviously. But you may not have noticed there is a way to know where the flames are going to come out of, and I didn't know that for a while, but it's kind of stupid, but when those sirens are flashing, that means that the flame is going to come out of that door. So that's how you figure out where the flames are coming out of. Look for the sirens, and when they're flashing, above the doors, that's when the flame is going to come out. It's still a bit of a pain in the ass though, because some of them come out really close together, where you got to be like moving. You got to be moving to the next door, like right after the one flame ends. So it can be a pain in the ass. And it's made harder by all the attacks, the bombs, and of course, you got conveyor belts going in multiple directions. So it's still kind of a pain in the ass. It's really not that easy. But that is how you do it. That's what you got to look for. When he does his charging barrage, you just kind of just jump and just, stay out of the way. The main thing is those flames that are really fucking annoying. But see, I got another stun on him, which did massive damage. So you want to try to catch up to him while he's still flashing blue after he does his charge. And go for those wall combos. Because a lot of times he's vulnerable when you wouldn't think he would be. And you can wall combo him and do massive damage. So, I think he died in the fire that time. I did ground stomp him too, which was kind of, I guess, helpful. I don't usually go for it. He's not too bad when you understand how those doors work. Like I said, look for the lights above the doors. And, keeping that in mind, you should be able to wait it out and attack him after he's done doing all his charges. But that boss took me like 30 minutes on normal my first time. But On hard mode, he was much easier for me, just because I already had an idea of what he was going to do. He pretty much does the same shit on hard mode. I don't know. Maybe he has more health. Maybe he does more damage, or he might be more aggressive. I'm not sure. The bosses were definitely a lot harder, some of them, but others were really not too noticeable for me. So yeah, now we are fairly far into the game. I believe there's 8 missions. But, it's not really the mission number that you want to look for as far as how far you are in the hard mode. It's beating those crazy sections is what's going to be really the test. Because a lot of this game, you can kind of, if you beat normal, you'll be able to cruise through a lot of these sections. You may die a few times, but it's not going to be like, I don't think you're going to get stuck for too long. The same general strats, apply as far as, using the spinning cyclone type of move for crowd control. Utilize all the weapons when needed. The sticks are good because they build up your dragon meter pretty fast, so you can build that shit up. See, I got two dragon meters already full. I'm on max capacity from using the weapons mainly. So remember, the weapon is not only good to beat the shit out of the enemies, it's also a good way to build. This particular weapon is really good for building up your meter. So, if nothing else, it's worth it for that. But yeah, you want to use your cyclone attack for crowd control type of stuff. You want to use your knockback move to knock enemies into the background and group them together so you can beat the shit out of all of them at once. Stuff like that. I also like kind of buffering, holding down the charge punch move while I'm comboing so that I can combo into like a charge punch and knock the guys back. And then I can crowd control by knocking guys to the back of the room. And as I said before, I try to knock guys into the walls if I can, because then I can wall combo them, which does massive damage. So especially if it's a stronger enemy, I'm going to try to get that wall combo if I can. Now, of course, you can't do the wall combo when you're holding the weapon, but eventually the weapons do break. So you can either get another one or you can go for the wall combos, which do massive damage. So yeah, I use my dragon here. I think it's not a bad place to use it because these guys can be kind of tough. They're really not that bad when you have all these weapons on the field, so you don't have to use it here. But they're still kind of annoying, so... I think I saved my dragon meter for some of the bosses, but I think I may have died anyway, so... If you die and then if you start out at a boss checkpoint, you lose all your dragon meter. So see, I got knocked down, but now I knocked him back in there, and that will kill them. So you can knock all the enemies off that ledge if you want. I didn't utilize it as much as I could have. I probably could have wiped this whole group out like really fast. Even those harder guys, you can take anyone out by knocking them into the, in the pits in the background. So whenever you see that, it's something you can take advantage of. But yeah, if you die on a boss, then you will lose all your dragon meter charge. So that's the only kind of bad thing about it. So it is worth trying to bring 2 full dragon meters to a lot of the bosses, but of course if you still manage to fail, then you'll have to do it with no dragon meters. You don't need it, but it is helpful. Because 2 screen clearing dragon attacks does massive damage to any of the bosses. So it can make things a lot easier. So this is kind of like a mid-stage boss, and he can be a little tricky. So here I died on here, and I did die after beating him as well, I think. And when you do that, you got to go back and fight him again. So you don't, after you beat this boss, you don't get a checkpoint right away. So just keep that in mind. So the idea with this asshole is to try to get him up against the walls, like I said, and do those wall combos if possible. Like, that would be ideal. I don't remember exactly how I dealt with this particular version of this boss, because I have also fought him in the challenge mode and on normal, so I don't, remember exactly. I haven't actually watched my hard playthrough. I did watch some of the sections, but, you can pretty much edit this shit without really watching the video using an editing program, so that's what I do a lot of times. Just make sure that the footage is all, where it should be, but... So if you can get this guy up against the wall, though, it is helpful. Now, you can also spam wall jump attacks if you are having trouble, but being super reliant on them is not going to be real helpful later on, you know. And they don't do a huge amount of damage, but they do decent damage. But you can also get countered, as you see here, so it's not always super reliable. If you do want to spam wall jump attacks on a certain section, the best character to do it with is probably the ninja. The ninja character that you can play as, I think Hanzo, or maybe not. Maybe I'm mistaking it with this guy. Maybe it is this guy. I think after you beat this mini-boss, I think you unlock him as a playable character. That's probably what it is. I already had him unlocked because, you know, of course I was playing on hard mode by this point. But, yeah, when you play as this ninja character, he's really fast. He can run fast, so he can get up to those walls really fucking fast. And his wall jump attack may do more damage, but I don't remember exactly. But I remember he's a good character for spamming wall jump attacks. And the reason I know that is because, you know, I experimented with cheap tactics like that, of course. Like, I always try to find cheap shit and shortcuts and shit like that. But in challenge mode, there was times when, like, there was these shitty missions where I pretty much had to spam wall jump attacks. So I got, you know, I started to learn what characters could pull more bullshit with that. And the ninja was usually a good choice. I usually did better for those types of sections, which I'm going to show in my tutorial of the challenge mode whenever I finish the remaining challenges. The last challenges are rated at the highest difficulty level, so I don't know if they're going to be that hard or, you know, how long they're going to take me, but so far I've been making pretty steady progress. Nothing has been that difficult for me, but there's been some hard ones. But still, the hardest thing that I've done so far in the game was those 2 boss fights. The 4 bosses at once and the final boss. So remember that you don't have a checkpoint yet, so you do have to clear all these guys out before you get the next checkpoint after the ninja fight. So you don't want to die in this area unless you want to fight the ninja again. You can also hit the enemies into those gongs. I forgot if there's a bonus in this area. Like, sometimes it drops dynamite, but I forgot if that's the case in this area. Sometimes there is a benefit to knocking them into those little gongs in the background, but my life was getting pretty low here, so I decided to use one of my screen clearing attacks instead of saving it. You know, I figured it would, it might save my ass. The boss for this stage really isn't that difficult anyway, so you don't have to worry too much about trying to save your dragon meter for the boss, which is coming up very soon. So yeah, these are the twins, basically. So yeah, these bosses are pretty easy. You know, you'll see I died here. I may have died once. Nothing too crazy, though. And now I come back with full health. This is how you spawn on the checkpoint. No dragon meter, as you can see, but you got full health. I would say, you know, just try to attack the ones that are available to attack, and if another one tries to rush you, use your spin kick to try to crowd control them a little bit and counter it. You don't have to do anything too advanced. You don't really have to know how to counter them or anything, but if you do counter their blue moves, you get massive damage as usual, and you build your dragon meter. So I think I found that I would counter them by accident because I never really learned how to properly do it. Not at this point. I had it down pretty well later in the game, but at this point, you know, I was kind of just fucking around. I was just being aggressive and not really I didn't really have a good strat. My strat was just to like target whichever one I could get to, and save my, you know, try to earn a little dragon meter if I could to use it on the bosses. But I was mainly trying to target the available, you know, whichever one was closest to me. And you know, if I got rushed by an enemy, I would just use my cyclone kick to try to get some damage and counter it a little bit. But you really don't take that much damage on hard mode, so I don't really know why some parts were super fucking hard compared to normal, but you know, it's not like on hard mode you take huge amounts of damage. I'm guessing the enemies are probably a lot more aggressive and shit like that, but I didn't really notice a huge difference, because normal I had already gotten better at the game by that point. So I wouldn't recommend starting on hard mode, though, just because of those two bosses. It would be helpful to have a general idea how some of the fights work and just the general layout of the game. I think it'll go smoother. The game is only about an hour and a half long, if you know what you're doing. But like I said, hard mode took me over 11 hours. So, and that was after beating normal and being pretty familiar with these types of games, So I would say hard mode is actually quite fucking hard, but it's really, for me, it was only because of those two parts. Other than that, really wouldn't consider it that difficult. But it probably would feel a lot harder if I started on hard mode. Some of the parts would feel pretty difficult. Though I don't think I would really, I would feel it too much until I got to those bosses. Even if it was my first time, I probably wouldn't have too much trouble until I got to a few of the bosses. So here I'm using my dragon meter finally. And there's not really much health left. There's only one left at this point. So if you just keep fighting, and playing like that, you probably will break through pretty quickly. It's one of the easier boss fights. So now we're about halfway through the game. So this stage was pretty damn easy. One of the easier stages. So there's not going to be much strat. Strats really for this. I mean, you get a hammer here, and there's plenty of areas where you can spam your acrobatic attacks by swinging on those lights above. You can use the background sparks to hit the guys into that. You can kick the cart and stuff like that. The hammer. You get a lot of stuff here. And you can really spam that acrobatic shit if you want to do that. So this big stick is like the best weapon in the game. It's slow, but it just destroys everything. It one-shots a lot of guys. Not the heavier ones, but... And we're going to see a strat. I'm going to show a strat to beat the boss super easy of this stage. It involves only using the big sticks and ignoring the other enemies. So I'll show that. So you shouldn't have any trouble with the boss of the stage after you see that little strat. But yeah, nothing challenging here. I mean, if you're really having that much trouble, then you're gonna really be, you're gonna be pretty fucked later if this part is difficult. But especially because you can spam the shit out of the ground slam attacks in that area. So now we got a few of these big enemies at once, but really these guys are actually, they look like they would be difficult, but they're way fucking easier than the Abobos. They're usually vulnerable. Like most of the time when you smack these guys, they're not tanking damage most of the time. They're usually just taking the hits, as you can see. Now if you're not ready for some of their attacks, they may get some heavy attacks on you and shit like that, but if you time the spin right, you can kind of fuck them over. So here I stomped the armor, and let's see if did I get the second one? Yeah. So you get a little time to do it, but the positioning is really anal. But yeah, if you stomp the armor out, then they can't come back. So, and it charges the shit out of your dragon meter, so it has two advantages to doing that. So it's worth trying to do that. The whip has massive range. The whip is really good. So, fucking whip them, I think there's a few background things you can do, like you can knock the guys into the windows. You may be able to knock all the enemies through that window, because some of the background stuff is one-time use, where you knock an enemy into it and that's it. You can't use it again. But that one looks like it's still available. Yeah, see, I knocked another enemy through another window. If I were to do this part again, I probably would have just put everybody through the fucking windows. Yeah, because I like to do that. I like putting everybody in the pits when I can. There's one part where I pretty much did that a little bit later, which came out pretty clean. But I probably would have done that more. You know, like I said, if I were to replay the game, I would improve on some stuff. But I was just going for a completion. I'm trying to get this axe that's buried beneath these benches. But I'll be able to get it a little later after it breaks. I think there's a way to break that. Knocking enemies into it or maybe slamming down on it. Maybe if I did my little tornado move, it might break it easily. But I didn't really know about all that shit back then. But yeah, this is another easy part just because you can swing, you can keep swinging from the top and doing your ground slam. Now sometimes I do the wrong kind of move where I swing on that big pole, and that's not really what I want to do. It's not really that useful to me, but I like swinging off of that top thing on the ceiling, and then I'll do a slam down. I think you can also use the walls here, so you don't even need to use the that thing to swing off of. You can probably just wall jump and do your ground pound. So at this point, I'm saving up my dragons. So I got 2 full charges, and I'm saving it because I think I was planning to use it on the boss, which I think is coming up soon. So you got some disappearing assholes, but remember you got axes, you got the ability to, like I said, keep ground slamming these things. So it really clears everybody out. I mean, the damage isn't massive, but it adds up, and it pretty much clears everything out. And I think if you time it right, you can even counter enemies with it. If you do it when they're blue, I think you'll get your counter damage, I think. So I mean, it does have a lot of benefits if you just want to spam it. But my health was not bad here, so it was easy enough to take these guys on. It does take longer to spam the wall attacks, but you can do it. You can definitely get away with it in this area. Like if that was all you wanted to do, just spam one move, you could definitely do it. But there's points in the game where if that's all you did the whole game, you would run into some big problems. If you didn't actually know the mechanics of the game, But I will exploit that shit whenever I find it useful. You got quite a few enemies here, but like I said, you got a lot of tools at your disposal. So, and if you want, you can use your dragons too, which I've been saving. So, like I said, whenever you can wall combo a guy against the wall, that's like it almost insta kills most enemies. It's very powerful. So, and when you fight bosses, it almost takes off like 3/4 of a health bar or some crazy shit, or half. It's a lot. So it'll wipe out most enemies if you can get a wall combo in. So here I think I died once on this boss. I think, well, not yet. I guess it's not the boss yet. This part's super easy though. It's easier than the previous areas. You got these explosives. So just hit some guys into the explosives and then dodge away, and then it'll just pretty much destroy most of the enemies. It's more of a little cinematic scene than a gameplay, So this is the boss. So I think I died once here, but here was the trick I ended up using. This makes it super easy. There's going to be 2 big sticks on the map. So, grab the first large stick and then just target the boss with the stick. Don't waste your swings on the regular enemies because you have a limited amount of swings. You have like 4 swings per stick. So, I think if you hold the swing button, you do a bigger swing, like a more powerful one. Same with the baseball bat. But I'm not 100% sure, so you may want to hold the button when you press it. Though I'm not sure if that works with the big stick, like if it has an even stronger swing if you hold it. But that's what I was doing. I was just assuming that I had to hold the button down to get the stronger swing. But yeah, you got 2 sticks, so you basically got 8 swings you can get on the boss. And if you do that, you can try to group enemies if they happen to be near each other, but don't waste a swing on any of the enemies. It's a waste. It just makes it easy. If you use it exclusively for the boss, it's really easy. I wasted one on one of the enemies, but it didn't really matter because his health was so low. But yeah, I mean, you can get his health down as much as you want before you start attacking normally. You can also attack the boss against the walls. Like I said, the wall combos do massive damage. I think there's also a ground pound area too, where you can swing and do ground pound in the middle of the arena. So you got a few options, but the sticks make it super easy. So this is another stage that's really not too difficult. The boss gave me trouble on normal because I didn't realize that you have to hit the enemies into these pillars. I realized that hitting them into the pillars, did damage the pillars. Like I noticed that, but I didn't know that that's what I had to do. I thought I could also attack the pillars by punching them and shit, but eventually I noticed that it wasn't doing any damage to them. So that's pretty much the trick for the boss of the stage, but the stage itself is very easy. I think there's some bullshit platforming in this stage, if I remember right. But, like I said, with the checkpoints, I'm going to show a way to, skip it all. I pretty much bypassed the whole platform area. If you walk along this narrow beam, you can kind of skip a bunch of shit. It is a little tricky because the alignment is really bad in this game when you try to walk a straight line. It's kind of hard to do for some reason, but it's really not that bad. You may have to adjust a little bit as you're walking along the beam, but it shouldn't be too difficult. There's a lot of background shit. Like this is more of just a fun little combat area because there's a lot of shit that you can hit enemies into. So I can't really think of anything challenging in this area. But it's a cool area. There's a lot of shit to interact with, which is definitely cool. I think that's the strongest point of this game is, it has a really good flow to combat between charging your dragon meter and, knocking enemies into background. There's a lot of background interaction with the objects and things like that, which makes it the combat very exciting, so that's definitely cool. You can knock enemies into this wheel a few times if you want to use that to take enemies out. You get a few uses of it. It kind of, once you use it, it kind of charges up. You have to wait a little bit, but, it's an option. But you don't really need it. I mean, it's like I said, this part's pretty basic. The next stage will have pretty much one of the hardest bosses in the game. But, this stage is not going to be a problem. For easy sections like this, I usually save my dragon meters. You see, I have 2 fully charged dragon meters, but this part is so fucking easy. You even get bats and shit. So I was just saving it up in case I needed it. See, if you wait a little bit when the enemy is about to charge, when he puts that line on the ground, if you wait, long enough, you'll be able to counter it pretty easily. But a lot of times I get anxious and I'll do the tornado move right away, and then if you do that, you'll pretty much always get hit. So you want to be patient and wait a little while when he puts that thing on the ground and gets ready to charge. Once you get used to that, it's easy to counter them, but you can't be too trigger happy like I was. You might have to wait 4 seconds or something like that. There's a little bit of a delay. But yeah, again, you got plenty of shit in the background to utilize. You got weapons, and these are all enemy types that you've dealt with quite a bit by now. I guess I used one of my dragon moves just to clear some shit out, just to save a little time, but there is a tricky room, I think, in this area. It's a pretty difficult room, but if you save up some of your dragon meter, you can kind of wipe out that room. So don't go too crazy with it. You know what I mean? Try to have close to 2 of them, so you can use them. So actually, I died here. So it's actually I lost all my dragon meter from that anyway because I died in this next area. But this is the checkpoint. So I'm going to show how to skip it here pretty much. They want you to ride these platforms and do all this stupid shit. But here's how you can kind of just bust through. It's not going to be super clean, but you'll get the idea. It's a little tricky, but the reason it's hard, a little bit hard, is because the game kind of controls like shit when it comes to platforming. I mean, you'll land on the platform, but you'll still fall off if you're too close to the edge. It feels very sloppy, but once you get past some of this bullshit, you'll see you can kind of run past some shit. They want you to ride this platform, but see what I do is I just go on the beam, and I skip the platform. But just be aware you're going to have to realign. While you're running on this beam, you have to realign yourself because it's kind of like when you have, when your car is out of alignment and it drifts off to one side. That's kind of how this plays, to say the least. So you're probably going to fall a few times if you don't have it mastered. Like you saw I fell, and it's a little tricky jumping off of here and landing on the beam without fall because it's hard to kind of know exactly where you are. You see, I almost fell. But I find this easier than riding the platforms through the whole area, and slowly moving. So for this part, you can kind of just zigzag into these little safe areas and try to jump. But it's still a little tricky. It's a sloppy. It feels very sloppy. But it's really not that difficult. But, I kind of bullshitted my way through. This part is very irritating. It's very stubborn with how it lets you climb on the ladders. You'll see in a moment. It didn't take me too long this time, but it's a very irritating section. It's one of the shittiest parts of the game. Probably the shittiest, so-called platforming section of the game. So you can ignore the guy on the left, but now you're going to climb side to side on the ladders. And it's very unresponsive, like when you want to get to the one on the far right. You got to make sure you climb up the semifinal ladder just high enough, and you really don't have a lot of time to do it. You see? You would think that you could keep moving to the right, easily by just, jumping, keep jumping right, but you can't. You have to climb up, and then you can move over to the right. So it's very fucking anal. See, I gotta climb up. I don't have a choice, and then I can move over to the right, but it's just really fucking sloppy. You can easily keep getting barraged by the grenades and knocked down. So you just got to try to get the timing down. You got to do it as tight as you can. But that part's a pain in the ass. So this part is kind of annoying because, again, the depth perception in this game is real shit. So I just try to stay in the center of the platform, and I'll move to the right, when it starts to kind of line up from the center, but I didn't have this part down at all. I mean, I almost died here. I think I managed to barely make it. You see, I had almost no health left. So if you're patient enough, once you make it to this area, you can fall and it doesn't matter in this area, which I did, you see. But then you can kind of walk around these things. It looks like you're trapped. But if you walk around in the background, you can actually go around them, I think. See, I went around those. So that part is safe. You can't really die here. So now you'll get a checkpoint. So if you die in this section, you'll get a checkpoint here. Which you see, I did die here. So this part is very easy with a full health bar. You'll get your checkpoint, and then this part is super easy. All you do is hit these things and just keep running to the right. If you want, you can use your tornado move, or you can throw shit back at the Abobo to kind of slow him down, but you really don't have to. Because eventually you'll break through. Even if he knocks you through, you get through, so it really doesn't matter. Either way, you're progressing to the right either way. So I just flamed the area. I think I burned myself as well, but it doesn't really matter. Like I said, because you get a checkpoint here. Unless you're trying to 1cc the game, you don't have to play this well. So, if you don't break the wall, he's going to break the wall for you. So just keep moving to the right. And that's it. Now I think you're at the last checkpoint. Maybe. I don't really remember. There's a little bit of platform. This is easy. I don't remember this being hard. Because if you fall, it looks like you're trapped, but you can break these boxes. So you can just skip all these platforms if you want and break all the boxes. It just takes longer, but at least there's not a timer on the stages. You'll definitely be dealing with timers if you want to do the challenge mode. I think there's like 30 to 50 different challenges. I haven't unlocked them all yet, but you know, most of those are timed on a strict timer, so that's where, you know, the timer comes into play. But at least in campaign mode, I don't think there's really a timer, which is good. It wouldn't really add anything positive to the game. So this boss was tough for me on normal the first time, not realizing that it's all about throwing the enemies or knocking enemies into the pillars. So whenever she's standing on a pillar, it probably seems obvious, but you got to knock the enemies into the pillars. Like I said, I thought I was damaging the pillars by punching them and shit like that, but I was noticing for a while that the health bar on the pillars wasn't really going down when I did that. So you do have to knock enemies into the pillars. So you can either do that by grabbing and throwing the enemies into the pillar, or my favorite way to do it is to punch them once, and then my second punch is going to be a background punch that knocks enemies into the background. The reason I do a regular punch first a lot of times is because I want to line up the enemy. So, you know, by landing that first punch, it kind of stuns the guy and lets me know that they're lined up so that I can get that background shot in. But sometimes I just go straight for the background shot. But it does help to line it up if you do one regular punch first and then follow up with a background shot. It's one way to go about it. If you can combo her against one of the walls, it's great. And the pillars count as walls. So if you do a combo, if you combo her against the pillar, you'll get a wall combo, which does massive damage. But it's a little bit difficult to line her up with the pillar when comboing her, because you know you don't have a lot of room to work with. You know, it's a narrow. You have to line her up like pretty damn good to do that. But I have done it before. But you know, it's better. It's easier probably to throw her against the wall and combo her if you can. But you don't need to do the wall combo. So you know, you can just keep knocking the enemies into the pillar. There's no timer, so you may want to clear out some of the enemies, but probably better to just, you know, lure all the enemies to the pillar so that you can start knocking them all into the pillar. Sometimes you got to kind of wait around for the enemies to line up. She doesn't really do that much damage with her tornado thing that she does in the middle of the arena with the projectile, so it's alright if you get hit by that. It's not really a big deal. But you just want to focus on you know, knocking those enemies into those pillars. That's the main, because then it stuns her for a little bit, and you can get some damage. And you know, even if you don't wall combo her, it doesn't really matter. You'll beat her eventually. See, I had a lot of enemies lined up that time, so I was able to take the pillar out fast. I think when you damage certain pillars, I think it saves the damage you did on them too, so the next time she lands on it, it should still be damaged. But yeah, very easy once you understand what to do. So now this is the semi-final stage, and this was, this has the hardest boss aside from the final boss. So something to keep in mind. It's gonna look, it may look easy when you see it here, but that's because I died for like 3.5 hours on it, and then I was able to pull off a pretty aggressive strat using weapons and stunning, which I'll try to break down. It's even kind of hard to even break down and explain it because it just took a lot of getting a feel for how the bosses, you know, when to counter them and, you know, when to knock the enemies back into the background and shit like that. But so, you know, obviously it's going to take a lot of practice. It's not going to be something that could be easily replicated, I don't think. So if you want, you can eliminate these guys pretty fast by knocking them into that little conveyor belt area. And you can wall combo this one if you want for big damage. I don't know if I got the wall combo. I think you can wall combo them against that short little thing there, but I'm not sure. I think that's the first time I actually grabbed an enemy and then punched him in the stomach. I never really used that move. I wasn't really using throws or blocking for most of my hard mode playthrough, so I mean, those are definitely things you could utilize. I didn't start blocking really until the final boss. I probably should have blocked sooner, but I would prefer, the dash and strike and do that than really to sit there and block. But, the easiest way to deal with the final boss was to kind of block his moves and then counter him, I found. So I did end up, I was stubborn for a while, but I actually got pretty far in the final boss by spamming wall jump attacks almost purely, but it was super tedious, and, most of the time it wasn't super effective for me. It would take really long. I could have probably won that way if I was really fucking stubborn, but I decided to actually try to block and fight the boss, counter his moves normally, which still took a long time, but it is a lot more reliable than trying to wall jump the boss, I found. Though there are parts where if you're stubborn enough, you could wall spam, spam the wall jump attacks. It kind of reminded me of when I did mission mode on Master Ninja for points, and for 40 million points, and like there was missions where I would spam the shit out of the wall jump attacks for hours, and not really do any other strats. There were just missions where I could get away with that, and I was really fucking stubborn, and I would do that for fucking hours. But I didn't take it that far this time. I'm not quite as stubborn as I was 20 years ago with playing games. I actually try more strats and shit now. So this room is hard if you don't use your dragon meter. There's parts where, like, if you don't utilize your dragon meter, it can get pretty hard with some of the harder enemies. Though these guys aren't too bad, but they're pretty aggressive. But you got your wall combos, so if you can get off some of those, that will help. But there's a lot of enemies to deal with in here. But I would say, if you get a dragon charge, use it in this room, because it's easy to die here. I don't know if you get a checkpoint in this room, so I probably wouldn't chance it. I don't think I died in this room on this playthrough because, I think I used my dragon, as you can see, and that was able to clear most of the enemies out. So I couldn't tell you if there's a checkpoint there. There is a checkpoint here in this next room, though. I see I died here. So this is more of a fun area, not too challenging. But when you get here with like no health, it can be hard, as you saw. You don't get much health restored between checkpoints. So because this game doesn't have a live system, this would be a hard 1-to-1 CC because it means you have to no death run the game. So it's quite challenging. I could see myself doing it aside from the two bosses. I would have to learn those two bosses way more consistently to have a good chance at it, because those two bosses were really fucking hard. And Willie is not easy. Machine Gun Willie before the final boss is not exactly fucking easy either. He can be a bitch, but that's more learnable. I could get that down more consistently. But yeah, for this area, I knock a lot of guys into the hole. So basically, if you see, I got knocked in there myself, but if you keep using your background attacks, you can eventually break the glass in this area, and then you can knock like pretty much all the enemies into the hole if you want. So I find that to be an easy way to deal with this area. Otherwise, it could probably be quite challenging. It'd be a lot harder. When you knock enemies into the background, though, you'll notice there's a wall that keeps moving through. So I think sometimes that will block you from knocking enemies in the back. But if you just keep punching enemies to the back of the room, you'll knock them in the hole more times than not. So don't worry about trying to time that moving barrier or anything like that. Just knock them into the back, and most of the time they will go over. So as you can see, you may also be able to knock enemies over the railing to the right and left, but I'm not sure. I go for the one all the way in the back. I find that the easiest, because you have a single button you can press which knocks guys back, so you don't have to do any charge moves or anything advanced. You can just straight up just do one punch and knock the enemies back, and you can even hit multiple enemies back at the same time with that punch. So it's great for grouping. And it's really good for knocking enemies into the pits, that are in the background. So very easy if you do that. So normally having all these large enemies would be, challenging, but they can easily all go into the pit just like the regular enemies. So If you want, you can do one regular punch to kind of stun them a little bit and then follow up with your heavy background punch. I didn't want to waste my dragon meter, but I did end up like not being able to beat the next section anyway. Or maybe not. I guess this is not the actual boss fight yet, which is, like I said, super fucking hard for me. But this is just another regular section. I don't know where the checkpoint is. I couldn't tell you if this area has a checkpoint after the elevator. So, you know, to play it safe, I would say just try to play carefully, play well. But the checkpoints are pretty forgiving. You know, on hard mode, you get the same checkpoints that you do on normal, as far as I can tell. So, you know, it really isn't too bad to get through the stages themselves. Okay, yeah, there's this area. You can just jump down if you want. Nothing too impressive here as far as challenge. There's a little wall here that you can use. Even though some areas are not really considered walls, they're more like counters or like low elevation type of things, you know, like couches and shit. Some of that stuff you can actually do wall combos on, which is cool. You know, even though you can't wall jump off of that counter area because there's a gap in the middle, but it does activate a wall combo if you hit them against the counter. There's a lot of little things like that you can wall counter or you know, do not really a counter, but wall. Like, I guess I'd call it a wall combo type of thing, but it activates a super powerful move, as I've been mentioning. So, you know, there's a lot of like, little areas that you can do that on. So it's just something to try to look out for because it does massive fucking damage. It also has a ton of invincibility frames. So if you do activate a wall combo and it goes into that zoom in animation where the camera zooms in and automatically, you know, does the wall move, you're invincible during that. So, you know, as long as you can get that move out, enemies cannot interrupt it, you know, once it's been activated. So you got like some stripper poles and shit you can fuck around with in here and do some, you can do some spinny moves that's, you know, semi-useful. I wouldn't really call it very, very useful. It doesn't do a lot of damage. It's alright though if you're stuck, but I don't really like using it because, you know, anything in this game where you have to press the right trigger to swing on the environment is really fucking finicky. All the right trigger stuff in this game is finicky, which is climbing ladders, picking up weapons, swinging on poles, etc. Anything with the right trigger in this game is very fucking finicky, very hit or miss for me. So you can just use your background punch and you can hit every enemy into the urinal if you want. I was trying to get this asshole to, you know, to take a dive into the fucking piss, but, you know, because it's kind of amusing, but it's just more for fun, you know, because this is just an easy area with some guys taking a piss. So I think there's a Burmov that comes out, but, you know, these guys are fucking easy by this point. But he does do some damage on you, I think, if you're not expecting him to crash through the wall, you know, like the fucking Kool-Aid Man, you know, you might take a hit. You know, I didn't really remember I didn't remember that really from normal, you know. I mean, I remembered it when I saw it, but I definitely didn't have the game memorized at all after beating normal, you know. But it did help because, you know, I had an idea of at least what to do on all the bosses. Though I had to change my strategies, you know, radically for the final boss and for the boss coming up. You know, those strategies really did not apply. So that's why it took me like 3.5 hours to beat these bosses coming up. Because like I said, you're going to be fighting 4 bosses at the same time. With minions, with a lot of minions, and with a helicopter. And one of the bosses rides the helicopter, so she's hard to hit. You have to knock her off the helicopter. So for this part, all these enemies can go into this railing. I think I knocked all the enemies into the railing. So, you know, try to lure them towards the railing, which is not hard to do. It's a narrow area, so when you do the knockback punch, it knocks enemies really far back. So, you know, if you need to stagger the enemies, just do one punch and then follow up with the background punch like I normally do. It makes it easy to line it up. And you see I was pretty much able to line up pretty much all the enemies. I even got some groupings. So, you know, you can hit multiple enemies. It has a pretty big, like, hitbox where it lands. It's almost like a shotgun blast, you know. It has a little bit of width to it, so it'll knock multiple enemies. You can also use your cyclone kick if an enemy's about to hit you. That's usually what I do. I was using a Scuff controller, and I had the back paddles mapped to the Cyclone kick, which was slightly helpful because I didn't have to move my thumb off the face buttons. I could easily counter shit that way, you know. So now this next area, this is your next checkpoint. You see I died here. This is actually a little bit of a challenging section. It's one of the harder combat sections, but it's not too bad. So you want to get your whip. The whip is useful here. And there's going to be some female enemies that come in. Easy enough to whip. These zombies are pretty annoying, but not in this area. But they're annoying in some of the later challenges. You know, not in the main campaign. They're not too bad in the campaign. But they're still kind of annoying in this area. But if you know where they're spawning, you know, memorizing spawns is a big part of these games. You know, routing, as they say. But if you know what enemies are coming up, it makes it a lot easier. You won't get surprised. I had a little bit of an idea after dying here a few times because it's a little bit of a tricky section. Probably one of the sections that gave me the more trouble for the combat sections, because most of them were pretty easy. So unfortunately, you can't really use the railings here to knock the guys into the water for some reason. Even though it looks identical to the last railing area, it just doesn't count as one of those areas, it seems. But you can wall combo them against the railing, even though it's not really a wall. So if you can get any guys against that railing, you can get that wall combo damage. I do recommend saving your dragon meter because there's going to be a tricky part coming up where it's actually useful to have some dragon meter. I mean, you can use it here if you're having trouble, but I prefer to save it for a little bit later. Those guys are annoying. They have like a similar move to the final boss where they will jump in the air and spin. And, you know, I still couldn't figure out how to fucking counter when they jump up in the air and spin. They turn blue while they're in midair, and I could not figure out how to counter them. But now when I think about it, I'm starting to think maybe you actually have to time a jump kick perfectly when they launch in the air and turn blue. Like, that might actually work, but it just didn't come to me at the time when I beat the final boss, so I never really countered that move. But there was other shit that I could counter, so I made up for it. So these guys can now be knocked into the water for instant death. So, you know, I would say utilize that. With these shield guys, I wasn't good at countering them at this point. I mean, now I am after doing the challenge mode, but what you can do with these shield guys is wait for them to turn blue, and then you hit them vertically, like I said. You go around their shield, or you go behind them and hit them. But usually if you go around them and come up into them and hit them, it gets easy to go around their shield. But these guys can all go in the water as well, so you can try to do that if you land one of those punches. Especially if you get that first punch in and stun them, it's easy to follow up with a background punch. So now these guys just toss a bunch of dynamite and shit. So it's actually better to fight these guys out in this former area instead of going out and trying to fight with all the fire and shit. I mean, you can do that, but there's no point. It just makes it easier because you can lure the guys to this water. And once you lure this fat ass out here to the water area, you know, you can kill him instantly. So that's what I was trying to do here. I was trying to manipulate this asshole. See, now he's going for a swim. That's what I was trying to go for. Now you can just run through here. You don't even have to fight anyone in that fire area. So, and now we're at one of the hardest bosses in the game aside from the final boss. So I'll try to break this down. So what I did was, you can see the death here. What I did was I first target the roper. I have an order in which I do everything. It's pretty specific, and I can explain it a little bit more later. But first, I'll just go over what I'm doing here. So right now, I'm prioritizing the roper first, which is the guy with the afro and no shirt. So he's the first boss that I'm going to try to take out. You can also use your tornado to kind of like spin when he throws the roper at you to damage roper and counter it a little bit. It's not an official counter, but it does counter it. So I'm targeting Roper as the main enemy I'm attacking, because you want to take him out. You want to take somebody out first, and I prefer taking out the Roper first. So what I'm doing is I'm knocking him into the background, and he'll get stunned on the electricity in the background. If you notice in the background of the map, there's an electric area at the very back. That's where I'm trying to knock enemies and bosses into. See how I'm grouping them all into the back? They'll get stunned in the electricity, and that's a big help. And then I'm grabbing the bats, and I'm hitting them with the bat, because the bats do huge damage. So I'm using the bats actually to do a lot of damage. And what I'm doing is I swing once regularly with the bat, and then the second swing is a charge swing where I hold it down and then release it, and that does huge damage. That combo does massive damage. So I'm doing that charge swing for my second attack while the guy is still in the air. And I'm targeting the Roper, as you can see. Even though I've stunned some of the other bosses and shit, I'm not focusing on them right now. So it's kind of a methodical, I'm trying to take out the Roper first. And the order is specific for a reason. I just found it easier to take the Roper out first. But, yeah, so now Roper is almost dead, so we're going to take him out in a minute. So now he's gone. And now, because I charged up my Dragon Meter fully, I just took it out on the Abobo. It doesn't really matter who you do it on, because it's a screen clearing thing. I think it damages everyone pretty much equally, so it doesn't matter too much. Use your spin to counter the Abobo. If you can get him to charge, and you time it just right, you can counter him. And, of course, it does massive damage to him, but it also builds your Dragon Meter up, and it stuns him as well. So it's very good to do that whenever you can. So I took out Linda as collateral damage mainly, just by fighting these other guys. But the idea with Linda is to take her out, you got to throw guys into the helicopter to knock her off the helicopter. So be aware of that. You can either throw enemies into the helicopter, you can knock them into the helicopter, or you can use the baseball bat and swing at enemies and knock them into the helicopter that way. So counter this Abobo as you see me doing that. It's very useful to do, because now he's stunned. And now I have another Dragon Meter I can use on him. But yeah, the basic order I was going for was Williams, then I take out Roper, and then Linda got killed in the collateral damage, so I got lucky with that. I didn't even get a chance to target her, specifically. And then the Abobo was the guy that I left last. That's how I like to do it. But you want to prioritize the order of enemies, as the ones that give you the most trouble, probably. So that you want to think about it and say which ones are like the hardest. So let me do them in this order. So for me, the Ropers were very annoying, because the Roper would keep swinging at me with his bat and interrupting all my attacks. So he was kind of pissing me off. So I was like, let me fuck this Roper up first. And then the Williams is pretty easy to deal with. The main annoyance with him is that he drops grenades and shit every once in a while. But he's not super aggressive like the Roper is. So he's pretty easy to take out. So that was my order: Roper, Williams, and then, Linda. But, with Linda, it depends if you can knock her down to be able to attack her. So if she's not available, you could just deal with the Abobo in the meantime. You could switch it up a little bit. But that fight took me like over 3.5 hours. Very fucking hard. And I really had to have a routine down. But remember that background area with the electricity is a stun area, where you can stun all the bosses and enemies if you knock them back into that area. So you want to try to group them and, use that stun to your advantage. And when they're stunned, start doing that bat combo, the 1-2 bat combo. First a regular swing, and then a charge swing while they're in the air. And that does a lot of damage. That's how I was able to take the Roper out so fast. So, just something to keep in mind. Now, this is the final stage. And, I did die here initially, but it's really not that difficult until you get to the bosses. There is one hard section, though. That was actually pretty tough. But this part's really not that hard. You can use the environment a bit for the enemies to get, taken out by the spikes. I kind of just ran through the block section with the moving blocks. Nothing too strategic. But yeah, you're just going to be fighting the enemies. Try to watch out for the traps, or let the traps work for you by kind of luring the enemies, towards this right side of the screen. And then, see, some of them will get speared and take massive damage. So that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to get some environmental damage from the spears and shit like that. I just felt like it was safer to do that. I didn't really want to, be involved in the freak show over by the left side of the screen with, being fucking stabbed constantly. So for this part, I died on that section, but this is the checkpoint. You'll see the checkpoint now. When I retry, I'm going out to this. This is the next checkpoint. With these sorcerer assholes, now the easy way to deal with them I found is to throw them off this opening. If you noticed, I broke some boxes, and see I tossed that guy off to the left. I'm going to try to toss everybody off to the left through that opening where the spikes are. You can't see it, but there's spikes there. You may see a few of the spikes, but, you get the idea. So the idea is I want to knock these guys into the spikes instead of trying to, fight them normally. So that's what I'm trying to do. I think I had to give this guy a little push here, but there he goes. I went down too, but it doesn't damage you that much when you fall on the spikes. So if you got to go in there to take a, to push a guy into the spikes, don't worry about it too much. So now for the last guy, you can easily just wall combo him against one of the walls. Or throw him in the spikes. Either way, you could probably throw, you could throw everybody into the spikes. Or you can do your charge punch and knock him into it, but it's a little tricky to line up. Sometimes there's a pillar that's in the way, so I didn't get it too clean. But I think everybody did end up going in the spikes. So that's an easy way to do that. Now, I prefer to take this bottom route. Just watch out where you're climbing down, because he climbs really slow and you can get stabbed. But you can also, I think you can jump down from up there. I don't even think you need to use the ladder, but either way, once you get down here, this is the route that I prefer. If you take the upper route, you got to fight green abobos, multiple of them, and I find it irritating. Down here, you got to fight more enemies, but you get a shitload of weapons. So this was my preferred route. So use the hammer. Remember, with the hammer, you can jump and then hold the hammer button and do a massive slam. I didn't know about that at this point. I probably just didn't really realize that. Maybe I had done it before by accident. I'm not sure, but I learned about it later when I started doing the challenges. I got more familiar with some of the mechanics of the game, but I did hard mode before I tried any of the challenges. So you got a lot of tools here to use. You can stomp these guys' armor when you take them down like usual to get the dragon bonus to your bar and take them out. And there's tons of weapons in here. So really, this is a really easy area. It's more of a fun little fight. And it's pretty easy if you throw all those sorcerer guys into the spikes. Really makes it easy. So there's really not too much here that's going to be too challenging with all these weapons and shit. You could probably beat this within a few tries. I actually took this axe here into the next area with the Willy fight, but the semi-final boss is coming up next. And I did take the axe into the next area, but unfortunately I died, so then I had to do the Willy fight with no dragon charge or no weapons from the previous areas. But you can bring a weapon in just in case if you happen to be successful. It doesn't hurt to have an extra weapon. So this fight may have taken me, I don't remember if this one took 15 or 30 minutes, but it's a little tricky. But the final boss is the one that took me like 4.5 hours. Very fucking hard. Even harder than that previous boss we dealt with the 4 bosses at once. I found it to be even harder than that. So this guy, not super hard. He doesn't have a ton of health bars like the last boss does. And he's a lot easier to deal with. Like, Willy himself is really not that dangerous in this game. Machine Gun Willy was a dangerous opponent in the old games because he'd one-shot kill you with his machine gun, but that's not the case here. So he's really not too bad to deal with. So the main thing in this fight is dealing with all the minions. There's a lot of waves of minions. So you want to deal with them appropriately. Now for this green abobo, now that I know, like, it would have been easy to deal with the green abobos had I knew about the countering technique. But at that point, I just didn't really know how to do that. Basically, you want the green abobo to pick up a rock, and when he does that, he's going to turn blue. You wait for him to turn blue, and then you hit him. And that's really the best way to deal with them, like that. But all you need is a regular punch, and it'll work. It'll do massive damage. You don't have to use a stick. It's not really worth wasting the stick for that, because this stick has limited use. Some of the weapons also seem to disappear in this fight, which is annoying, because I was trying to save them for Willy. And I think the big stick actually disappeared, if I remember right. I was trying to save the big stick for Willy, but I don't know if you can do that. So you may want to, depending on when the weapons disappear, keep that in mind. And you may want to use them on certain enemies. I think that's why I wasn't really conserving the weapons too much, because I think they were disappearing by the time Willie came out of the door. But I am building some dragon meter here, and it's good to use these sticks because these sticks build up your dragon meter really fast. So it doesn't hurt to have 2 full dragon meters for the Willie fight. Like as soon as Willie comes out, I think I had like almost 2 dragon meters. So I was almost fucking ready to really fucking do massive damage to Willie. But see, I did something stupid here. I used my dragon, assuming that Willie had already entered the arena. But the problem was, see, he was just coming in. So I fucked that up. I could have done massive damage with that first dragon attack. So now I have 1 dragon attack left. Obviously, it's still going to do a lot of damage, but I could have got double damage with 2 screen clearing attacks on Willie. So I fucked that up. So just wait. Make sure you wait for Willie to come through the door and then use it. Don't get greedy like I did. But you can wall combo the shit out of Willie, and he's pretty easy. But he gets hard. He gets a little hard as more minions come out. It gets tricky. That's why I was saving my dragon. I wanted to save the second dragon attack for when all the minions are out. You know, because it clears out the minions. But of course, there's going to be another wave of minions. There's a few waves. But remember, as long as you kill Willie, the minions don't matter. Like you don't have to finish off the minions. So focus on taking this asshole out. Like I said, the more wall combos you can do, you can take him out really fast. I actually took this guy out really fast in the challenge mode by doing some crazy wall combo shit where I was able to get behind Willie and kind of spam him against the wall. It was a cool trick. That'll be in my tutorial. That might actually work. That might actually work on hard mode too, but it would be harder to pull off, I think, because of all these enemies. So I don't know how easily I could have done that on hard mode, even if I knew that trick that I learned later. But really, he's not too bad. You know what I mean? You got enough tools to work with. You got a lot of weapons and shit. Probably want to watch out for some of the lasers and shit, but he's not too bad. The minions are aggressive, though, so that can be a pain in the ass. You know, I was down to the wire for sure. It could have taken me a little bit longer, you know, if I would have died here. You see, I was down to like my last hit or two, so. But really not that bad. Not compared to what we're going to be dealing with now. So this is the final boss. And this was super fucking hard, like I said, over 4.5 hours on this fucking guy. He has tons of health bars, and his clones are super fucking aggressive. So I'm going to just go over the strats that I use. There is a strategy that I found that's consistent. So for the most part, this is where I learned how to use the block button. I had not used it for like the whole game. So now we're going to see the block button. So you see, what you do here is you just hold block, and you let him attack you, and then you can counter him with your own attacks. Whenever he finishes his attacks is an opening. So try to wall combo him. Try to line him up near the wall as much as possible. But when he does his dash, when you're blocking and he dashes through you with his shadow dash, be ready to run to the other side and combo him. And, you know, just keep blocking and let him attack first. See, let him attack first, and then attack, and then you can often get a counter in when he's doing that handstand kick. Like, if you keep punching him, a lot of times you'll get a counter. I don't actually know how to time it other than that. I would just mash after he does his attack, and it would get in sometimes a counter. But it doesn't do it a lot. But sometimes the counter does get in as a little bonus. So you let him finish his attacks, whatever they are, and then you follow with your combo. And if you get him against the wall, you do massive damage. You want to try to do it next to a wall if you can. So now he sends out all the clones. You want to try to get close to them and do your cyclone kick when they're clustered together. And kind of keep doing that. Use the wall jump attacks too, because they're pretty decent on the clones. You can spam wall jump attacks this whole fight and almost beat them. Or at least I almost beat him doing that, but it was really fucking tedious. And I probably wasted a lot of time being stubborn instead of trying to block and just wall jump attacking. I don't recommend spamming just wall jump attack, but if you want to do that, maybe use the ninja. The ninja is the fastest to get to the wall, but I wouldn't really recommend just relying on that. I find it best to just block both when there's one shadow, I'll try to block the shadow as well and counter him just like I do the regular boss. But when there's more than 2 enemies on screen, I'll usually I'll go back to the cyclone technique of grouping them, using wall jump attacks to try to clear out the clones. And I won't really focus on the actual boss too much, because I want to clear out the clones first so I can just fight the boss normally. So that's mainly what I'm doing now. And you're also going to have a feel for when he's open, and you're going to be able to get extra hits in. Now, for this, you need the wall jump attack. When he fills the ground with red, I didn't know how to dodge that. It can one-hit kill you pretty much, or take 3/4 of your health. You need to know how to dodge that. So when the floor turns red, you have pretty much like a split second to be off the ground. I don't even know if you can block that. Like if you hold block, I don't know if it'll even work. So you got to make sure you're jumping off a wall. And sometimes you're not going to be close enough to the wall, and you're just going to get fucked. And that's what makes this really hard. It's one of the things that makes the fight really hard. And all the health bars. Because you'll notice he regenerates his health at one point in the fight, and then you got to start stripping his health bars again. So it's just a pain in the ass. But this is the idea. You know, you block, wait for him to finish his attack string, and then you combo him with a full combo of mashing, you know, the punch button. And you want to do it close to a wall if you can. You can also do some air stuff to get a little extra damage, but it's not necessary, you know. The main strat is to block, wait for him to finish an attack, and then attack. And of course, it sounds like it would be simple, you know, but it gets to be a pain in the ass because the clones are super aggressive and can kill you before you get to the next wall if you need the wall jump. So, I mean, that is the successful run, but that took me a while. So there is one attack he does that I mentioned earlier where he kind of vaults up into the air and spins, and he turns blue in midair. So for that attack, you want to block, and while you're blocking, you kind of want to walk up or down to get out of the way. Don't walk back, walk up or down vertically, and usually that will avoid that jumping, spinning attack he does. Now, if you want to actually try to counter it, that's what I don't know how to do. I never learned how to counter that, so I would usually walk up or down while blocking, and that would actually like dodge it, and then I could follow up with a combo. So that's the only one attack where I divert from not just, you know, holding the block button and walking back. Like in that sense, I'll move up and down while blocking for that one attack. That's about it. But there's probably a way to counter it. So if you know how to counter it, let me know. I mean, it's probably good information for players, you know, to get some extra. Because if you can get those counters in, you make the fight a lot easier by charging up your dragon meter, doing massive damage, and stunning the boss. So it has a lot of benefits if you know how to do it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. If you have any questions, let me know, and thanks for watching.